I'm Linda, and I've lived in the same cozy house near Mission Bay in San Diego for over 40 years. I'm 67 now, a widow for the past 7, and most days I keep myself busy with my garden, my books, and the occasional trip to the market. Life moves slowly these days, and honestly, I've come to appreciate the quiet. My birthday was last Friday. I spent it alone, sipping tea by the window, watching the fog roll in from the water, waiting for my daughter to call. By dinner, I'd given up and put the lasagna I'd made back in the fridge, telling myself she was probably just busy. 4 days later, her text came. "Happy belated birthday, Mom. Sorry, I forgot. You should have reminded me." I stared at those words for a long time, trying to make sense of them. Not even an apology, not even a call, just that cold little message that managed to blame me for her forgetting the day she was born. I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone still in hand, heart heavy in my chest like a stone. I wasn't surprised exactly. Disappointed, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But surprised? Not really. Things had been slipping for a while now. I used to tell myself it was just a busy season, that she'd circle back, that family comes in waves. But waves bring things back to shore. This felt more like a tide pulling everything away. Over the years, I'd helped her and her husband more times than I could count, paying for their second car, covering emergency bills, chipping in for summer camps, birthdays, ballet classes, all without hesitation. After Robert died, I set up a monthly transfer from our trust. Just enough to ease the pressure. Make sure my daughter's family didn't feel the pinch. It was never a loan. Never something I expected back. It was just love, in the only form they seemed to understand anymore. But that text? That text told me everything I needed to know. She forgot my birthday. Worse, she made it my fault. Not a slip. Not a miss. Just indifference. And suddenly, I realized I'd spent years pouring from a cup that no one had refilled in a long, long time. That afternoon, I opened my laptop, clicked through to my bank's website, and ended the automatic payments. It was quiet in the house, just the hum of the fridge and the soft thump of my old cat settling at my feet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just clicked a button. And in that one small motion, I drew a line I should have drawn years ago. Sometimes people think heartbreak happens all at once, but mine came slowly, like rust on metal. Her text was just the final flake that made the whole thing crumble. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry. I was just done. Looking back, I think I started giving before they ever asked. When my daughter found out she was pregnant with her first, I took 2 weeks off work to move in and help her through the worst of the nausea. I stayed up with the baby those first sleepless nights while she and her husband caught what little rest they could. When they struggled to make rent during his layoff, I quietly covered their bills and told them not to worry. It was never framed as a favor. It was just what mothers do. When they found the house they loved in Chula Vista, I emptied half my savings for the down payment without a second thought. College tuition for the kids? Covered. Medical bills after their youngest broke her arm? I took care of it before they even opened the invoice. I told myself each gesture was love in action, that maybe if I filled enough gaps, they'd feel how much I cared. At birthdays and holidays, I always gave too much. Expensive toys, gift cards, and even new appliances when they're broken. They never asked outright, but they didn't have to. The silence was a language I knew fluently. I believed that love meant stepping in before you're needed, that if I kept showing up, they'd see me not just as support, but as someone they cherished. I thought closeness would naturally follow generosity, like warmth from a fire you keep feeding. But fires need more than wood. They need air, movement, and attention. And somewhere along the way, all I'd done was burn through pieces of myself trying to keep something alive that was barely flickering. I didn't want praise or payback. I just wanted to matter. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was little things. A canceled lunch here, a birthday dinner pushed back because of some work emergency, or school recital. The calls got shorter, then they stopped altogether, unless there was a reason. Even when we were in the same room, they were never really with me. They'd scroll their phones through dinner, nodding absently as I spoke. Conversations became brief updates, schedules, logistics, nothing more. I was no longer someone they caught up with, just someone they reported to. The grandkids used to run into my arms when I visited. That faded too. Now I'd get a polite hello, maybe a quick hug if prompted. They started calling me Linda instead of Grandma. The first time it happened, I laughed it off. The second time, it stung in a place I didn't know could ache. I kept telling myself they were just busy, that this was how families evolved, that independence was a sign I'd done my job well. I convinced myself I was being too sensitive. But the silence between us felt heavier with each passing season. I would sit in my car after visiting, staring at the steering wheel, wondering what I'd done wrong, wondering when I became background noise in a life I helped build. Still, I held on to the idea that love meant not questioning, that if I stayed consistent, they'd come back around. I didn't want to believe that my place in their lives had an expiration date. The day I stopped the payments, there was no announcement, no warning, just a quiet afternoon, a few clicks on my laptop, and a final sip of lukewarm tea. I thought I might feel guilt or second-guess myself. I didn't. What I felt was clarity. The silence lasted 2 days. On the third morning, I woke to 7 missed calls and 3 texts, all from my daughter and her husband. Not a single one asked if I was okay. Instead, it started with confusion. Did you change something with the account? The mortgage bounced. Can you check with your bank? Then came the concern, but only about their credit score, their utilities, their lifestyle unraveling in real time. By the end of the week, I'd received over 30 calls, half a dozen voicemails, and a handful of guilt-laced texts. Not one of them said, "We miss you." Not one said, "Are you all right?" It was all money. Where was it? Why had it stopped? How quickly could I fix it? I sat in my kitchen with the phone face down and a pen in hand, listing out every time I'd helped them in the past year, paid for their HVAC repair, covered the kids' after-school programs, sent an extra check when they went on vacation to Maui. I kept writing until the ink ran out. They never said thank you for any of it. Not once. And now, with the money gone, they were finally calling me again. Not because they wanted me, because they needed the faucet turned back on. It hit me then, clearer than ever. I wasn't family. I was funding. A convenient direct deposit with a pulse. I'd spent years convincing myself that love looked like sacrifice. My role as a mother meant filling in every financial gap without question. But love without respect is just servitude. And I'd been volunteering for it, smiling all the while. The voicemails got more frantic. Her voice cracking, his growing defensive. "We don't understand what's going on. If something's wrong, just tell us." There was no warmth in it. No real worry. Just the fear of losing their cushion. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The silence was doing all the talking for me. And for the first time in a long time, I liked the sound of it. The flowers arrived first. A huge arrangement of lilies and white roses, far too expensive for a casual gesture. I stood in the doorway holding the card, reading the words, thinking of you over and over, trying to decide whether to laugh or cry. Then came the phone calls. Soft voices, sweetened greetings, and questions about my health that had never been asked before. My daughter called twice in one day, asking if we could grab lunch like we used to, even though we never had. The grandkids started texting. Quick little messages about school, a funny teacher, and asking how I was doing. At first, it tugged at me, cracked something open that I thought had closed for good. But it didn't take long before the rehearsed tone bled through. I wanted to believe it. I really did. But you can feel when love is real and when it's being read off cue cards. Even their voices held a tremble, like they were afraid of getting the script wrong. My chest ached from the wanting. The hope that maybe, just maybe, they were trying. But the timing was too neat. The sudden affection is too precise. The confirmation came at lunch with my friend Alice. She leaned in carefully, like she was afraid of breaking me with her words. Your daughter's been telling people you're not well, that you've been forgetting things, making erratic decisions since Robert passed. I sat back in my chair, cold creeping up my arms. Alice wasn't one for gossip. If she said it, it was true. She added quietly that they were talking about financial guardianship, just in case. My hands went still in my lap. All the fake calls, the flowers, the children's sudden interest. It wasn't love. It was set up. While they played the part of the caring family, they were painting me as unstable behind my back. They weren't trying to bring me closer. They were preparing to take everything. And for the first time since Robert died, I felt something other than grief. I felt the beginning edge of rage. I called my attorney the next morning. James had been with our family for over 2 decades, long enough to know when I was serious. I told him I needed a full review of the trust, a competency evaluation, and a referral to someone who could discreetly look into my daughter's financial activity. Within a week, I sat in a quiet office across from a well-respected psychologist who ran me through every test in the book. I passed with ease. No signs of cognitive decline, no confusion, just a woman tired of being underestimated. The investigator's report was worse than I imagined. Not only had they been moving money through hidden accounts, they'd met with a legal advisor 2 years ago to begin drafting paperwork for guardianship. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been in motion while I was still grieving Robert. I waited for the right moment. A family dinner, just like they'd suggested. The table was dressed up, the good silver polished. They smiled across from me like everything was normal, like this wasn't a stage for their final performance. When dessert was cleared, I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table. Inside were the bank statements, the email transcripts, the psychologist's letter, and a copy of the will I had rewritten the day before. I spoke slowly, clearly, without raising my voice. I told them I knew everything. That their actions weren't just immoral, but criminal. That any further attempt to interfere in my affairs would result in legal action, and that I had enough evidence to make sure it stuck. My daughter turned pale. Her husband looked like someone had kicked the breath out of him. I let the silence stretch just long enough to feel like judgment. I stood up, smoothed my blouse, and told them the estate was now going to a charity that helps women over 60 navigate financial independence. I thanked them for dinner. Then I walked out the door and into the night air, the weight of their schemes no longer mine to carry. I moved 3 months later. A small cottage outside Santa Barbara, just close enough to the ocean that I can smell the salt in the morning. The neighbors are kind, and the quiet suits me. I started volunteering at the local library on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I shelve books, help kids find their favorite authors, and chat with the other volunteers over coffee. It's simple, and it fills me in a way money never could. My daughter hasn't called since dinner. I haven't reached out either. The silence between us feels earned now. Not sad, but necessary. Emma sent me a letter last month, handwritten in her teenage scrawl, full of questions and half apologies. She asked if we could talk sometime. Just us. No one else listening. I wrote her back. I told her she will always have a place in my life if she comes from a place of truth. We met for lunch last weekend, and for the first time, she looked at me like a person, not a resource. We talked about books, about school, about the ways people change when they're afraid of losing comfort. She didn't defend her parents. She didn't try to fix anything. She just listened. That was enough. I don't need big gestures anymore. I don't need anyone to call me every day or praise me for what I gave. I just need honesty, presence, and respect. Sometimes, walking away isn't about bitterness. It's about choosing peace when chaos wears the face of family. And I've learned that loving myself enough to let go might be the most generous thing I've ever done.